All right, a very good morning. It's 7 minutes past 8 a.m. in the morning. Quite chilly in the capital city, but wherever you are watching us from, you're right on time for Kirk in the morning. Welcome aboard. It's quite a good feeling to be back again after quite a long time. And as we always do, we take a look at what has been happening all through the week in matters to do with the politics and governance. There has been a lot to talk about, and in this particular program this morning, we'll be interrogating what has the government done so far in regards to easing the lives of Kenyans. There is a proposed Finance Bill 2023, which has become a matter of contention between the Kenyan people, the opposition, and the Kenyan government. What is the position of the President? President William Ruto has continued to insist that if we are to resurrect and revive the country's economy, then we must pass the Finance Bill. As well, the opposition says this particular finance bill does not put the interest of Kenyans before anything else. That is what we will be trying to interrogate this morning with my guest, who will be joining us shortly in the studio. But as we always do, our particular main theme of this particular program is taking a look at what has been happening all through the week. And first things first, welcome aboard. My name is Chris Sambo, and this is Kirk in the Morning. Remember, we are streaming live on Facebook at Kirk TV Kenya and also on YouTube at Kirk TV Kenya. You can send in your feedback and be part of this particular conversation as we take a look at what has the government done in regards to easing the lives of Kenyans. That is what Kenyans are terming as a tax burden, and what the opposition is terming as punitive taxation by the government. But the government itself is saying this is the way to go. We cannot keep borrowing. We must sacrifice and we must feel the pain. Tighten your belts is what the President William Ruto says. But what does that mean for the Kenyan people? Mudhora Kariara is a TGN party leader. Will be joining me shortly to interrogate all that. But first things first, let's take a look at what is happening on the roads this morning. All right, just so quick, I'll be taking a look at what is happening on the road. It's 10 minutes past 8 a.m. in the morning, and as usual, Fridays don't look so much good. But let's take a look and see what is happening on the major roads. Just want to begin with Mombasa Road, which doesn't look so much bad according to my traffic map right here. It doesn't look so much bad because there is flow of traffic, movement of vehicles from Next Gen Mall all the way through to Nyayo National Stadium, where there is usually a culprit of traffic. But right about now, I can see the traffic is moving quite clearly. Just taking a look at yet another major road. I'll be taking a look at Thika Road, which doesn't look so much bad this morning, but as usual, the junction connecting Kiambu Road and Thika Superhighway at Muthaiga doesn't look so much good, especially when you look at that interjunction that is right about there. There is a little bit of a traffic snarl up there. So if you're using Thika Road, it's quite clear this morning, apart from getting closer to Muthaiga all the way through Pangani. But as it stands, looks so much good. Langata Road doesn't look so much bad this morning, moving swiftly as vehicles descend down to the central business district. That is what Langata Road looks like. Let me take a look at yet another road that is links to the central business district, and that is Ngong Road. Ngong Road doesn't look so much bad according to my map right here, despite a little bit of a traffic snarl up at different points. Of course, the traffic being caused by the number of traffic lights that are seen at Ngong Road, and traffic moving in swiftly and smoothly, descending down to the central business district. That is what Ngong Road looks like, and crossing to see yet another major road that links Eastlands into the central business district. That is the Jogoo Road, which doesn't look so much bad. I can see there is a little bit of traffic movement on Jogoo Road. Traffic moving in slowly and smoothly, but there is a lot of vehicles getting to find their way into the central business district. Those are some of the major roads and what is happening on the roads. Of course, we keep an eye on what is happening on various roads this morning so that we get informed in case you're moving from one location to another, especially if you're trying to access the central business district. This Friday doesn't look so much bad, so you can be able to get into the central business district on time despite different traffic snarl-ups at different traffic points. That is what the roads looks like. So we take a look at what the newspapers have written this morning. All right, and before my guest gets into the studio for us to have the talk of the day on the state of the nation, let's take a quick look at what the daily papers have written this morning. Of course, we begin with the Daily Nation, which has a top story there of Raila's 10 demands for Ruto. Opposition leader Raila Odinga has offered President William Ruto a 10-point economic blueprint he says is a better alternative to the high taxes proposed by the government in the finance bill. Mr. Odinga wants the government to stop duplication of county roles and responsibilities, curb wastage in the executive, and seal corruption loopholes, even as he maintains subsidies on basic goods must be reinstated and the proposal to increase taxes on goods and salaries be withdrawn from the bill. That is what opposition leader Raila Odinga gives to President William Ruto in regards to the Finance Bill 2023. And opposition warns of a return to mass action should the draft law sail through. Of course, the government has insisted that this bill will pass through because considering the number of members of parliament they have in the bigger house. On the bottom of the Daily Nation is a story there, that story on finance bill and what the opposition wants. You can get it on the Daily Nation on pages 4 and 5. Yet another story by the Daily Nation talks about ex-State House official in a 413 million child support fight. That is quite an interesting story there on that particular finding by the Daily Nation in regards to a case in court where ex-State House official is being sued for 413 million child support fight. Who is that? And do you need to know who is involved in that particular case? Of course, that story is on page 10 of the Daily Nation. So you can be able to grab your copy and get to see what the Daily Nation reports in that particular story. Pages 2 of the Daily Nation talks about Kenya to receive 600 million cancer equipment from nuclear agency. Of course, that is quite an important milestone in regards to the fight against cancer. 600 million cancer equipment from nuclear agency. And the Daily Nation has quite a number of stories there on pages 4 and 5. Is an in-depth of what Raila told Ruto is my alternative to tax plans to fund the budget. Of course, an outburst of the opposition leader on Thursday, where he said that this was his final stance and saying that he's directed members of parliament allied to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition to shoot down the Finance Bill 2023. And in case that bill finds its way through the parliament, then he threatened a return to mass action, saying that they will retreat and mobilize. That is a story by the Daily Nation that has been written on pages 4 and 5. Of course, the Daily Nation has quite a number of stories. On page 6 talks about summit to entrench reforms in coffee sector, says DP Rigathi Gachagua. That is a story there written by the Daily Nation, which talks about leaders and farmers from coffee growing areas will hold a 2-day meeting in Meru to discuss matters to do with reforms in the coffee sector. And to quote the DP, Rigathi Gachagua said, we want to eradicate brokers that stand in between the farmer and consumer of coffee. We want farmers to get more money in their pockets. That is the story there by the Daily Nation, and quite an interesting story on page 8 that you need to find out what really transpired. That's been the spat between Deputy Governor for Siaya County and the governor himself, who is James Orengo, and his deputy, William Oduol. They've been in a spat of leadership. Of course, the deputy governor accusing the governor of corruption and misuse of public funds. But what did that turn to? Turn to an attempt to impeach the deputy governor. And the Daily Nation now reports Siaya members of county assembly vote to send deputy governor home. In majority, they decided that they need to send the governor home in regards to some corruption allegations that he's been involved with. Of course, that is what has been happening in the Siaya County. And the Daily Nation continues to report matters to do with governance on pages 10. So you can be able to grab a copy of the Daily Nation and be able to get a glimpse of what the Daily Nation talks about this morning. Of course, behind the Daily Nation is matters to do with sports. Quite an informative story is there. But at the back page talks about teachers sue insurer over poor services. The Teacher Service Commission has sued the insurance company over poor services being offered to its members. Of course, that is a story that you need to follow up in the Daily Nation. Let's take a look at what the Standard newspaper talks about this morning. And it talks about on the top page, Ruto's fresh blow to media on advertising, baptism of fire for the new boss, CBK boss. And just at the top page where they have an insert picture of the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Raila says why we must reject the finance bill, a different version of the story there by the Standard, which talks about opposition chief Raila Odinga wants the president to withdraw the finance bill. Of course, you can be able to get that story on page 6 on what the Standard has written and what is their view of what is the making of yet another finance bill, that is termed Finance Bill 2023. Just to quote what Right Honorable Raila Odinga said yesterday, he said, "This bill is economic sabotage. If President Ruto insists on this country will go into full recession. This bill requires and must get fierce resistance." That is the Standard newspaper talking about the finance bill. At the bottom of the Standard newspaper talks about 24 billion is too little, too late for schools. And that is in regards to the release of the capitation funds, which was seen as a big relief for schools. But now the serious cash crunch in the schools has termed the 24 billion that was released to be quite a little and too late for schools. 16.9 million students in secondary, junior secondary schools and primary schools. 28 billion is the total amount of money the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Ezekiel Mashogu, had promised schools. And in 2022, 18 billion was disbursed in January to clear the 2022 debts. Of course, 4 billion is the difference between what the CS promised and the funds that have been disbursed so far. That is a story by the Standard newspaper, and continues on pages 2, where he talks about the in-depth of the state of education in this particular country. Ruto says AU member states will benefit more from stronger union. That is page 4 of the Standard. Talks about the President William Ruto's visit in Zambia, where he addressed an AU summit, saying that the Southern Africa, Central and Eastern Africa must unite if African countries must grow business-wise. Of course, that is what the Standard reports. Page 6, 7 is an in-depth of what the state Azimio wants Ruto to withdraw finance bill and apologize to Kenyans as state to sidestep media use poster to dispute my government newspaper. That is what is happening in regards to the state of the newspapers this morning. Of course, there is so much to report, there is so much to write about, but That has been captured in both the daily newspapers, the top daily newspapers, the Standard and the Daily Nation. Of course, our conversation this morning will be ranging on what is the outcome of the Finance Bill 2023, the tax burden on the Kenyan people vis-a-vis the demands by the Azimio la Umoja coalition for government to withdraw the finance bill, while the government holds that if we need to revive the country's economy, then we cannot afford to fail this particular finance bill 2023. What next, or what does it mean for the Kenyan people? That is our conversation this morning. Shortly, I'll be joined by TGN party leader Muthiora Kariara, who will be getting in studio in a short while. But don't go far away. We'll be taking a very short commercial break. But when we return back with our conversation this morning.
Here, they want us to get rich overnight.
So what did you tell them?
I told them I have
to. John Maxwell once said, "A reader is the one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way." Simply put, readership is all about vision and influence. Join me, Robert Waihenya Goge, the Secretary General of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, every first Monday of the month from 8 p.m. as we microscopically look at the reality, specificity, and simplicity of leadership only on Kirk TV. Specificity.
Uongozini, a show by the leader, for the leader. Next on Legends.
We meet a couple that is not yet retired, but is a clergy couple, the Reverends Leah and Francis Degwa Kamunya.
We were the first couple clergy ministers in PCA.
It was a bit tricky and there were so many challenges because then our two sons were in secondary schools.
My dear brother, my dear sister, sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in like a flood. Sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in. He is coming in your family like a flood. Sometimes you tremble, sometimes you see the end of you. Sometimes you see as if you are going to be destroyed. But I want to tell you, God will be raising a standard for you. Praise the name of the living God. God will be fighting your battles.
Some visitors here, they want us to get rich overnight.
So what did you tell them?
I told them I have
John Maxwell once said, a reader is the one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Simply put, readership is all about vision and influence. Join me, Robert Waihenya Goge, the Secretary General of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, every first Monday of the month from 8 p.m. as we microscopically look at the reality, specificity, and simplicity of leadership only on Kirk TV. Specificity.
Uongozini, a show by the leader, for the leader. Next on Legends.
We meet a couple that is not yet retired, but is a clergy couple, the Reverends Leah and Francis Degwa Kamunya.
We were the first couple clergy ministers in PCA.
It was a bit tricky and there were so many challenges because then our two sons were in secondary schools.
My dear brother, my dear sister, sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in like a flood. Sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in. He is coming in your family like a flood. Sometimes you tremble, sometimes you see the end of you. Sometimes you see as if you are going to be destroyed. But I want to tell you, God will be raising a standard for you. Praise the name of the living God. God will be fighting your battles.
Here, they want us to get rich overnight.
So what did you tell them?
I told them I have to.
John Maxwell once said, a reader is the one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Simply put, readership is all about vision and influence. Join me, Robert Waihenya Goge, the Secretary General of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, every first Monday of the month from 8 p.m. as we microscopically look at the reality, specificity, and simplicity of leadership only on Kirk TV. Specificity.
Uongozini, a show by the leader, for the leader. Next on Legends.
We meet a couple that is not yet retired, but is a clergy couple, the Reverends Leah and Francis Degwa Kamunya.
We were the first couple clergy ministers in PCA.
It was a bit tricky and there were so many challenges because then our two sons were in secondary schools.
My dear brother, my dear sister, sometimes we
All right, in case you are joining us, welcome back to Kirk in the Morning. Of course, we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube at Kirk TV Kenya, and the hashtag is Kirk in the Morning. Remember, you can weigh in on this particular conversation and be part of the discussion. What is the status of the country? What does it mean if the finance bill finds its way through the parliament? The Azimio la Umoja coalition has threatened if at all the parliament passes that particular bill, then they might resort to a mass action. But does the country need the finance bill or a mass action? That is our conversation this morning. And yesterday, the Azimio la Umoja chief Raila Odinga spoke and gave 10 demands to President William Ruto in regards to what he should do, or rather what he should amend in that particular finance bill with a thump of, you must withdraw this finance bill. What did he say? Let's take a listen in to what the Right Honorable Raila Odinga talked about in regards to the finance bill.
In the history of budget making in Kenya, no regime has imposed so many and so high taxes on our people in return for nothing except fantasies and fairy tales. Look at the arrogance with which they want to raise turnover tax for businesses from the current 1% to 3%. No sane leader withdraws subsidies on basic goods, then increases taxes on the same goods and salaries of working people, including hawkers. Ruto is telling Kenyans to forgo 3% of their salaries and deposit it into some fantasy called housing levy. Nobody knows where it is housed. The government cannot agree whether it is a tax or an investment.
All right, and that is Right Honorable Raila Odinga Nwadi spoke about the finance bill, and at that point I want to welcome my guest here in studio this morning, Muthiora Kariara, is the TGN party leader. Karibu sana kwenye studio zetu.
Shukran sana kwa kunialika. It's always great when I have an opportunity to be hosted by a young leader of thought like yourself. And on a station such as this, it's a privilege. I'm really, really happy to be here.
And good to see you this morning. Of course, we begin at that particular point where, the conversation is surrounding the finance bill. First, do you agree with the government that if we pass this finance bill, that is the path for economic revival?
No, I do not agree, because within the proposed bill, there are clauses that are offending what needs to happen at the moment as we are trying to jumpstart our economy. Our economy has been slumping. So when we introduce punitive tax measures, as we've seen is proposed in the Finance Bill 2023, would be going against that effort. So I'm not in support of this bill passing as is. There are good things contained therein, but then we must weed out those which will be counterproductive. And I am in support of what the Azimio leader is saying, although not to the extent that we need to completely reject the bill. All I'm saying is it should not pass as is. Those offending clauses should be removed, and those on which improvements can be made, then given an opportunity for those improvements to be made.
The opposition has picked the housing levy as 3% housing levy as their main point in pushing for the opposition and other disregard for this particular finance bill. About the housing levy, do you feel the position of the government substantiate that particular introduction of the housing levy?
To begin with, the housing levy fund proposal is not well thought out. I have read it through and compared it to when it was introduced by the former regime under Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. I rejected it then because it was still half-baked. This too is half-baked. For instance, it's not very clear if the funds, the money in the fund can be redirected to other purposes besides just the housing projects. That has not been ironed out. You look at the provisions where it talks about how they will handle people who will have pilfered the resources of the fund, and it's a paltry prison imprisonment or a fine of not more than 10,000. For a fund that's likely to generate more than 100 billion every financial year, I think it would only make sense if there were more punitive measures for the same. So it's a good thing that public participation on the bill has taken place. Kenyans have given their views, and now members of the committee have retreated to go and try to see if they can adopt what the public gave them. So the idea is great. The timing, not so much. But then the way they intend to do it, the how, that's something I have a problem with. Remember, this is a government that already is going back on the promises that they made to the people when they were on the campaign trail. Recently, there was a promise by our president that the cost of gas will go down significantly. And then he came back and said he was not referring to the price of gas, but the price of the gas cylinder. So if we do not fine-tune all the elements of the housing levy fund, it's likely that after people have put money into the fund, the money will be misapplied, misappropriated, and then they will just have a slap on the wrist like they have had when they were going back on their promises.
You've talked about going through this particular finance bill. Of course, there are so many other things that are being opposed, including the 16% VAT. Let's talk about for our viewers. They do not know that some of them maybe they do not know that you wanted to vie for the presidency before what you term as sabotage or rather.
Yes.
There is what you had envisioned, and maybe from where you sit, the government at this particular point is facing opposition of what they feel is best for this country. From where you sit, what would be the difference at this point?
Well, I was running for president in 2022, but before then I had been on the ballot as a presidential running mate under Dr. Japhet Kaluyu in 2017. And we sold our manifesto to the people, but we ran out of time to convince enough of them to give us the mandate to govern this country. But in 2022, in that very fraudulent election, I was denied an opportunity to be on the ballot. And of course, that election is what gave us this anti-people regime that currently is misruling Kenya. Now, given an opportunity, we had said that we would endeavor to cut down on the cost of living, because even back in 2022, it was still very high. What has led us to this point is the high level of debt that Kenya has. The previous regime, of which William Ruto and most of the members of parliament and other government officials were part of, borrowed more than Kenya should have borrowed. For quite a bit of time, we have been living beyond our means. As a realistic Kenyan, given an opportunity to lead this nation, I would have insisted on us living within our means. The Kenyan economy cannot support a budget of 3.3 trillion. So when the president, after taking oath of office, came and said that he was going to ask the civil servants and basically the government to cut 300 billion from Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta's last budget, I lauded him, because that was a move in the right direction. That was us adjusting to live within our means. But you look at the proposed budget now, it's 3.3 trillion. So now,
all right, actually, this is 3.6.
3.6. So you see, he's gone back on his pledge. He was anti-borrowing. He was anti-additional taxes, which basically means him right now agreeing to the lumping up of taxes on Kenyans is him changing his tune. There is something, given an opportunity as a president, I would not have done. I would have stuck to the plan. Like he told us, he had this bottom-up model that was going to uplift those at the bottom of the pyramid so they can get to enjoy the fruits of their labor and of being in a prosperous and free country. But that's not what he's doing. He's deviating from his plan. That is something he must be called out for. We had a plan that I'm sure, given an opportunity, would have endeavored to grow agriculture, because Kenya is endowed with rich, fertile lands. And we have very industrious young Kenyans who are into farming. If we were able to produce food for everyone in Kenya, we would not need to import as much as we are importing and exert the pressure we are exerting on the Kenyan shilling as we import from other countries. So our budget would mostly have focused on increasing productivity in agriculture, so we produce enough for ourselves and for export, which would earn us forex. But when I look at the proposed finance bill, I do not see measures that will go into that. Yes, there is a slight increase in the allocation to the counties, but then you look at the national government's budget line with regard to agriculture, and it doesn't show the seriousness we expected it would have. Indeed, they introduced the fertilizer subsidy program and even distributed fertilizer, which was something commendable. But then these actions are yet to percolate to everyone that needs to get this subsidized fertilizer. We've heard about corrupt officials making money out of the deal. So these are things that we would have done better, because we believe our mandate would have come from the people, and we would not have special interest groups to soothe. So without cartels dictating what happens between the producer and the consumer, would have been able to lower the cost of living. That, among other things.
And when you look at the finance bill and you look at the state of the government has insisted that it will pass as it is because that is what they believe will change this country. And when you look at the number of members of parliament that they have in the bigger house, does that not indicate a clear pass of this bill as it is?
Well, it does, but that would defeat why they are even retreating in Naivasha right now. That they are not going to consider the input by the public. We've had a public participation process in the past couple of days. And that input is crucial because it's required, number one, by our constitution, and it's only wise that whoever you are, you do not consider yourself as having a monopoly of knowledge. In a marketplace full of ideas, there is likely that the idea you will end up picking will be better than what you started out with when you are working alone. So this committee needs to incorporate the views that Kenyans have given. I hope in their retreat they will do so and amend some of those offending provisions in this bill. Should they do that, they most likely will drop the idea of increasing VAT on fuel from 8% to 16%. Because if they do that, then it means that the cost of every other item will increase. And therefore, their fight to bring down the cost of living will be defeated. So it's time they ate back their words, went back to the drawing board and collected and collated the views that Kenyans have given with regard to the Finance Bill 2023.
And when you talk about that, I want us to take a listen in to what Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua said in regards to the Finance Bill. If we have that particular clip, we can play that particular clip so that we listen in to what DP Gachagua said, not any other day, but just yesterday.
Usidanganywe na wale watu wameandikwa. Hawa ndio watakatwa. Nyinyi kuna kazi mumeandikwa sahihi. Sasa mnadanganywa mtakatwa na nani? Si ni wale kwa sababu wanataka kujificha kwenu. Si hata nyinyi tumtafutie kazi kwanza ndio mkatwe baadaye. Si mkipata kazi mtakatwa. Lakini saa hii wale wenye kutoa ni mimi na hawa.
All right, and that is the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. He's talking about, you're being told nyinyi mtakatwa, but si tuwatafutie kazi kwanza ndio pia nyinyi muanze kukatwa hapo baadaye. What do you make of remarks such as those by senior government officials in regards to the bill? Is it a misinformation to the people about what is expected of them, or rather is it a conceal by the government to make the finance bill look like an angel to the Kenyan people?
It's exactly that. It's misinformation. And it saddens me that someone of our Deputy President's stature would mislead the public like he's trying to do. The truth is, the passing of the Finance Bill 2023 as is will destroy more value than it will create. Yes, when, for instance, we adopt the Housing Levy Fund and start on the project to build these 200,000 houses for Kenyans who will be enrolled, it will create jobs. But then the other punitive tax measures within the bill will destroy high-quality jobs. Jobs from which people pay their pay-as-you-earn tax and generate revenue for this government. So it will be taking with one hand and giving with the other hand. But then whatever it's taking is high-quality jobs and creating short-term, low-quality jobs that will not even generate the revenue that the government will need to fulfill the promises it made. So there is insincerity in how the government is approaching this matter. Obviously, nobody wants to live in a shack. We all want homes that give us dignity. But if getting that fulfilled at this point flies in the way of where we need to go, which is create quality jobs that can sustain Kenyans' lives, then we need to relook this matter. That's my position, and I hope that the overreach by the executive will cease so that Parliament will do its job. Our members of Parliament were sent to the August House to represent we, the common people. They are our voice. So they should be allowed to do their mandate uninterfered by the executive.
What do you consider punitive in that particular finance bill?
Okay, I could use the biggest of them all. There is a proposal to increase the value-added tax on petroleum products from 8% to 16%. We know that this will have a cyclic effect. Currently, fuel, petroleum, is at the cheapest filling station, it's around 187 Kenya shillings. When William Ruto and Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta were campaigning maybe 11 years ago, the price of petrol back then was 67 shillings. So right now it has tripled. What happened? During Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta's reign, value-added tax on petroleum products was introduced. So it went from 0 to 8%. Their proposal then was to take it to 16%, but then there was uproar from the citizens. And they listened, so instead of taking it all the way, they paused at 8%. So what William Ruto is doing is completing the journey they had begun. Now, when you increase the cost of fuel, we know that the cost of production of virtually everything will go up. So our manufacturing will be put in the deathbed. Kenya is already a very uncompetitive market for manufacturers. Yes, we are producing goods and even services, but then they are not competitive in the global market because our fuel cost is already an inhibition. So with this further increase, it will mean our goods will not be able to compete with goods from other countries. Investors are not going to consider Kenya as a first choice for investment because of the high cost of doing business. So the jobs that they are talking about creating will not come. So you increase fuel, transportation cost goes up, electricity goes up. Basically, everything will cost more. And the goal of lowering the cost of living will fail. That is contained in the Finance Bill 2023. There are proposals about increasing VAT on insurance compensation, excise duty on mobile money transfer services. You look at import duty, it's going to be increased. From the clip you just played, there is a proposal to raise the turnover tax from the current 1% to 3%. And then they are lowering the band. Initially, I think the band was 3 million and above is what was eligible to be taxed for the turnover tax. But right now, they're bringing it all the way down to 500,000 annually. These, among other measures contained in the Finance Bill 2023, are the punitive measures I'm talking about that will send this economy into a recession right after it's implemented. Employers, judging by whatever I have had, I've had opportunity to listen to some. They are no longer considering employees as assets. They are starting to look at those who work for them as liabilities because statutory deductions such as an NSSF have increased. There's a proposition for NHIF to be increased further within this finance bill. Already you know about the housing levy fund, that for you, the contributor, the employer must match an equal percentage of the same, I think, to a maximum of 5,000. All these costs are going to make Kenya's goods and services uncompetitive in the global market. And that's how Kenya's economy will go into recession. Because when you cannot sell what you're producing, then you will cease production. And once you cease production, that is a loss in the number of jobs that you can create. And when people have no jobs, then you know that their purchasing power is diminished. So how is our economy going to grow? How are we going to take care of those people at the bottom of the pyramid? That's why we are saying the Finance Bill 2023 needs to be amended before it is passed.
And if it doesn't get amended and passed as it is, as you look at things the way they are, you listening to what Kenyans are talking about, what the opposition is talking about, and what the government is talking about, we're talking about almost 10 months of the new government in office. Is that the right track, especially when you talk about the first financial year of a new government?
You know, I have this privilege that I was alive when the Moi regime ended and Kibaki took over. After Kibaki took over in 2002, within his first 6 months, we could clearly see where the nation was headed, and Kenyans were happy. When we looked at the cabinet appointments that he did, we said, yeah, that was a good thing. When we looked at the policies that were being implemented, for instance, they had promised free primary education. And right after they took oath of office, they went to implement. And when we looked at the blueprint, it made sense. So we would tick and say, yes, that's a good move. Yeah, that's fine. There were pointers that we were headed in the right direction. But with this regime, over 8 months down the road, with over 1.4 trillion in revenue collected, what we are hearing is our police stations are not able to cater for food for inmates. Civil servants are not being paid on time. We are almost defaulting on our debt obligations. We are a country where workers have been deducted, but the money for NSSF, NHIF is not being forwarded to the respective institutions. So the question is, where is all this money going to? And the answer is simple. It's been misapplied, it's been misappropriated, or the priorities have changed. They are no longer serving Wanjiko as they had promised. So we clearly are not on the right path, which is why a government elected as popularly as this was needs to go back to the people. The people embraced it because they brought the talk about bottom up, that they would focus on Wanjiko, who is at the bottom of the pyramid. They are not listening to Wanjiko. They need to start doing that. They are not implementing that which will fix Wanjiko's problem. Education, healthcare, fix agriculture. Yes, we have no money to create newer infrastructure, but then can we make the infrastructure that's already there function better? You've seen they went back on how the SGR was operating. And the figures right now, I was looking at this last week, show that we'll need to dig deeper into our pockets to sustain the SGR, something that we were getting out of. So my opinion is this government needs to sit back and listen and fulfill its promises as they had kept telling Kenyans they would.
Okay, on that particular note, there is a lot of repercussions in regards to if the bill passes as it is regarding to the Azimio la Umoja coalition, that they may call for a mass action. But we talk about that in a short while, because we're taking a very short commercial break. Don't go far away, because when we return back, we come with the second part of this conversation.
Here, they want us to get rich overnight.
So what did you tell them?
I told them I have to.
John Maxwell once said, "A reader is the one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way." Simply put, readership is all about vision and influence. Join me, Robert Waihenya Goge, the Secretary General of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, every first Monday of the month from 8 p.m. as we microscopically look at the reality, specificity, and simplicity of leadership only on Kirk TV. Specificity.
Uongozini, a show by the leader, for the leader.
Next on Legends.
We meet a couple that is not yet retired, but is a clergy couple, the Reverends Leah and Francis Degwa Kamunya.
We were the first couple clergy ministers in PCA.
It was a bit tricky and there were so many challenges because then our two sons were in secondary schools.
My dear brother, my dear sister, sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in like a flood. Sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in. He is coming in your family like a flood. Sometimes you tremble, sometimes you see the end of you. Sometimes you see as if you are going to be destroyed. But I want to tell you, God will be raising a standard for you. Praise the name of the living God. God will be fighting your battles.
All right, welcome back again to Kirk in the Morning. Our conversation this morning is around the state of the nation. Of course, we are looking at what is happening in regards to the Finance Bill 2023 and what are the Kenyan people saying, what is the government saying, what is the opposition saying. And talking about what the opposition is saying, we've been talking about what is included in that particular finance bill that Kenyans feel should be changed, even as we await the National Assembly to, decide on whether that bill passes as it is or it's going to undergo amendments. But let's take a listen into what the Right Honorable Raila Odinga said when he was issuing 10 demands to the government in regards to the bill. If the bill sails through, this is what Odinga said.
We also give final instructions to our members of parliament, after which, depending on how the Ruto administration behaves, this matter may take a very different turn. But we have agreed with our MPs on what to do. Vote against any tax rises. Should Ruto overrun the National Assembly, we will regroup and overrun him in the wider National Assembly of the whole people of Kenya.
All right, and that is a statement Mr. Muthura is about. The Right Honorable Raila Odinga is calling for, regrouping, and we shall retreat and we shall defeat the government in the larger picture of the people. Is threatening for a mass action, of course, in regards to that finance bill. Is it that necessary at this point?
Well, I support his assertions right there, and that's because whatever demands he's given are pro-people, and they're reasonable. And you can bear me out on this. There are 10, and it's simple. He says, stop duplication of county roles and responsibilities, which amounts to double allocation for resources. Very doable, very responsible. Why do I say this? Because we have the national government holding, for instance, funds meant for functions that are devolved, like agriculture. So you end up with a bloated budget that you could have avoided. You go to point number 2, number 3, all the way to 10. I could pick any randomly, and you'll see that they are reasonable. So if the government is not going to fulfill this, and the people end up paying the cost, because that's what always happens. And we can't have this conversation in Parliament because Parliament is captured. What option is left? The only option left is to take the debate to the people so that they can resoundingly, in one voice, tell the president that you are not leading us as you should. Number 2, they say zero-based budgeting, that is, they start from scratch instead of using former President Kenyatta's budget as their baseline. You just corrected me here when I had misquoted that our budget now is 3.3 trillion. It's 3.6. And how did they arrive at that? They looked at the previous government's budget, which was 3.3, and they thought we can do better than those other guys. Instead of costing from zero, that what do we need for this financial year? And then they say we'll need a pair of shoes here. What does it cost? This much. We will need a jacket. We will need a tie. And then they build the budget bottom up, like they always kept saying, instead of picking a previous budget and saying, if this guy spent so much on a jacket, maybe this time we should go for this kind of a jacket, and it will cost maybe slightly more because of inflation, or we are going for something more fancy. So let us create a budget for the needs that exist. So I support what he is saying. However, I know that protests are not the only way out. Before we get to a point where demonstrations are called, we can engage, we can reason, we can arrive at a way forward. So I will also urge caution on his part. He has representatives in Parliament. He can get them to do the job they are paid to do. That is, ensure that whatever legislation goes to Parliament is pro-people. This government, after it took office, the first thing they did is they removed subsidies. We all know what the impact of that was. The already high cost of living shot up. Now they are introducing additional taxes and charges, which are going to increase that price further. This debate can be had in Parliament, but that will only be possible if the executive is not overshadowing Parliament. We've seen that happen. So if we cannot have a civilized talk around what's affecting the people, then we'll have it in the only way that those in charge can hear, which is through protests.
Of course, when you talk about protest, we've seen the bipartisan talks have actually seemingly failed, to yield any fruits as was preceded before.
Exactly.
Does that leave now the opposition with the only option of protest and the repercussions of the protest as well?
It actually goes to reinforce why they're saying protest seems like the only option left. Because number one, we know that Parliament is captured. Number two, the proposed talks that were supposed to handle some of the grievances they had raised have failed because now these have been objective. Both sides approached the bilateral talks with hands that were not so clean by bringing, number one, to begin with, members who were from either sides. The Kenya Kwanza side brought Adan Keynan, who is supposed to be an Azimio member since he never resigned, and Jubilee is still part of the Azimio coalition. And then there is David Kosing on these other sides. So with the talks not going on, there is a likelihood that protests may be the only language this government will listen. Because when they were held, the president came down from his high horse and said he's now willing to engage with the opposition, even though he gave terms, but he had softened his tough stance. We do not need to get there, because any day lost is productivity lost. That is our competitive edge being eroded. Let us not have these disruptive activities. Let our leaders, for once, put the common man's interest and find a way to engage through the institutions that we have. So may the executive stay away from Parliament, allow Parliament to do its job, and then there won't be need for us to go to the streets.
If you look at the current situation in regards to the political differences vis-a-vis the Kenyan people, of course, when they say when the two bulls are fighting, the grass,
it's the grass that bears the brunt the most.
So now the Kenyan people are carrying the burden of what is a fight between two big political leaders in this country. When you look at the current economic situation and the current situation that we are in, if you are the president, what would you do at this particular moment with the issues facing the country?
Number one, our president must strike a conciliatory tone. We had a breakfast prayers the other day, but then it mostly came out to me as a mockery of what it's meant to be. Our president needs to genuinely reach out to the Azimio leader, because the Azimio leader has influence, has numbers. There are things that have been raised, and like I have said, they are very reasonable. If the government was to meet these demands, Wanjiko would be happy. So Wanjiko would not have any motivation to go to the streets. If the president prevails on the drive to increase taxes, and taxes remain where they are or they go lower, the benefits that will accrue will go to the Kenyan people. And for that, we will have tranquility and peace. If the cost of inputs for production, be it in farming or manufacturing, is down, then we increase productivity. But if we introduce all these proposed taxes, we are only going to make Kenyans hungrier, angrier, and the situation is going to get uglier. We must desist from thinking that anything good will come out of Kenyans uniting and rising against the government because the government is not responsive to their needs. Chaos have never produced anything good for any country. So may our leaders come to the table with clean hands, find a way forward, because it's possible. And may that way forward be found before the impending chaos erupts. Because the truth is, Kenyans are hungry. Kenyans do not have jobs. Money that was meant to be disbursed to schools has not been disbursed. salaries have not been paid. You can imagine for once we are at a position where even salaries for members of parliament and MCAs are delayed. These are extraordinary times, and they call for people to behave in extraordinary ways. Let the government listen. If I was president, I would listen more than I would talk. They are right now not doing that. Our deputy president, number one, is a culprit on this. He says whatever he wants, the way he wants, wherever he has a microphone before him. He needs to desist. He needs to know that not everybody is as privileged as he is. Our president has made almost over 30 trips now, I believe. That costs money. When he travels, that's a manifestation that there are government officials who are traveling abroad, and that costs us money. They have not shown us the value that those trips are accruing to the Kenyan economy yet. So let them cut on these expenditures that do not help anyone. Let them fight corruption so that they can seal the loopholes, taking away the revenue that's been collected. But most importantly, let us reconcile. This nation belongs to us all. Those who voted for William Ruto, those who did not, and the winners of the 2022 election who were those who abstained from voting because they were the majority. We are all part of this country.
Okay. Right, and I'm told we only have 1 minute that is left, so I'm going to use that minute as well. Whether the finance bill passes or not, what will be your final remarks?
I will tell Kenyans that we are at a point where we must change direction. If we do not change direction, we're going to end up where we are headed, and that is in economic turmoil. May our leaders, for once, be sober, put partisan interests aside, and focus on delivering to the people.
And I think that is a good point to wind up. But before we wind up, there's a question that I was told to ask you. When they stopped you from going ahead to vie for the president, we saw you, burning.
Well,
did you get an? Was it your ID or your voters, card?
Maybe just to refresh our viewers' memories. It was on the 6th of June 2022 when, as scheduled, I presented my papers so I could be cleared to run for president. But after meeting the requirements, I was denied the opportunity. And I thought that was unjust. And our electoral process for the longest time has not given us free, fair, or credible elections. So I did light a fire at Bombers in front of the Independent Elections and Boundaries Commission chair, Wafula Chebukati then, but it was a fire for justice in our electoral process because fraudulent elections give us fraudulent leaders who will not deliver on the Kenyan promise. I did not ban my national ID card, but I neither confirm nor deny that a fire was lit physically.
Okay.
It mostly was lit in Kenyans' heart, which is why you see them coming to the streets demanding for electoral justice.
I see what you did there, and it's quite okay because you got yourself out of the big trouble. Anyway, it's good to have hosted you this morning, Muthiora Kariara.
It's been a pleasure.
TGN party leader. Need to emphasize that, TGN party leader.
Yes, that's the great nationhood party of Kenya. Our philosophy is Utu. We want to infuse Utu into all government policies, should we be given an opportunity to govern this nation. But even in the opposition where we are right now, we are holding the governments accountable and ensuring that whatever policies they undertake, of course, puts the Kenyan first.
Right, thank you so much for making time this morning, and that is where we wind up this particular conversation on the state of the nation. But don't go far away, the program still continues because it is on a Friday. We always have our guest artist in studio. He'll be joining us shortly. You don't want to guess who is right in our studios himself. He'll be right here in a short while, so don't go far away. We'll be coming back in a short while, but for now we're done with the state of the Kenyan politics and the state of the Kenyan nation.
Here, they want us to get rich overnight.
So what did you tell them?
I told them I have
John Maxwell once said, a reader is the one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Simply put, readership is all about vision and influence. Join me, Robert Waihenya Goge, the Secretary General of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, every first Monday of the month from 8 p.m. as we microscopically look at the reality, specificity, and simplicity of leadership only on Kirk TV. Specificity.
Uongozini, a show by the leader, for the leader.
Next on Legends.
We meet a couple that is not yet retired, but is a clergy couple, the Reverends Leah and Francis Degwa Kamunya.
We were the first couple clergy ministers in PCA.
It was a bit tricky and there were so many challenges because then our two sons were in secondary schools.
My dear brother, my dear sister, sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in like a flood. Sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in. He is coming in your family like a flood. Sometimes you tremble, sometimes you see the end of you. Sometimes you see as if you are going to be destroyed. But I want to tell you, God will be raising a standard for you. Praise the name of the living God. God will be fighting your battles.
here. They want us to get rich overnight.
So what did you tell them?
I told them I have
John Maxwell once said, "A reader is the one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way." Simply put, readership is all about vision and influence. Join me, Robert Waihenya Goge, the Secretary General of the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, every first Monday of the month from 8 p.m. as we microscopically look at the reality, specificity, and simplicity of leadership only on Kirk TV. Specificity.
Uongozini, a show by the leader, for the leader.
Next on Legends.
We meet a couple that is not yet retired, but is a clergy couple, the Reverends Leah and Francis Degwa Kamunya.
We were the first couple clergy ministers in PCA.
It was a bit tricky and there were so many challenges because then our two sons were in secondary schools.
My dear brother, my dear sister, sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in like a flood. Sometimes we fear, sometimes we are afraid when the enemy is coming in. He is coming in your family like a flood. Sometimes you tremble, sometimes you see the end of you. Sometimes you see as if you are going to be destroyed. But I want to tell you, God will be raising a standard for you. Praise the name of the living God. God will be fighting your battles.
Zote zake Mungu ili nipate simama imara, hata watu 1000 wakianguka karibu nami, 10,000 kuliani mwangu. Dr. Mbuvi, si uchawi, ni maombi. Nguvu za giza zimeshindwa kwa jina lake, jina hilo kuu la Bwana Yesu. Nguvu za giza zimeshindwa kwa jina lake, jina hilo la Yesu. Kwa magoti nimefika hapa, kwa maombi nimefika hapa, si kwa majeshi wala silaha, ni roho wake. Nguvu za giza zimeshindwa. Si uchawi, ni maombi. Si urithi, ni maombi. Sio kwa nguvu zangu, ni maombi. Si uchawi, ni maombi. Nimevalia silaha zake zote, zake Mungu, ili nipate simama imara, hata watu 1000 wakianguka karibu nami, maelfu 10 kuliani mwangu, lakini mimi halitanikaribia. Kwa macho yangu nitayatizama. Si kwa majeshi wala silaha, ni roho wake. Nguvu za giza zimeshindwa. Si uchawi, ni maombi. Si urithi, ni maombi. Sio kwa nguvu zangu, ni maombi. Si uchawi, ni maombi. Ukweli, kanda kinoni, uadilifu, kinga kifuani, nayo injili, imani, ngao mkononi, wokovu, kofia ya chuma, upanga kiroho, niwe ni daima kwa nguvu za roho. Si kwa majeshi wala silaha, ni roho wake. Nguvu za giza zimeshindwa. Si uchawi, ni maombi. Ni maombi. Si urithi, ni maombi. Ni kwa magoti Baba, ni kwa maombi Mama. Si uchawi, ni maombi. Nguvu za giza zimeshindwa kwa jina lake. Kwa magoti, ni kwa maombi. Kwa magoti, kwa maombi, napiga sala.
Welcome back to Kirk in the morning. It's Entertainment Friday. Sasa tunapiga entertainment kidogo na studio. Guess who is in studio bana? Hii kamera itamchukua Mr. Mbuvi.
Vipi man?
Dr. Mbuvi.
It's a pleasure to be here. Asante sana.
Good to see you bana.
Nashukuru,
After a
nashukuru,
very
nashukuru.
long time bana.
It's been long. It's been
Actually,
long.
unajua
Thank for questioning. Well, that is scary. For questioning. Kwa kile inasound kama umeingia kwa one of those commissions. Pesa zilienda wapi? 15 billion is missing movie. Ziko wapi za wasanii?
good to see you.
My pleasure.
Umekuwa wapi Mbuvi?
Niko. Doing music, doing ministry, doing TV. I have some 2 shows on TV I do. Doing mentorship, reaching, producing many artists, bringing as many people as possible into the industry. People with the art element, but also with a heart for God and for ministry. Yes.
So let's talk about the last few months that have been, that have been for you. In the last few months, we've
Yes.
seen you also release some music in the last few months.
Yes.
Tuambie hiyo kubalance shows and doing music.
In a sense, they all come together because it's all in the bigger, it's all in the bigger picture of entertainment as ministry. Because when you start with music, then you realize, hey, there's a voice you have that music alone is not enough to pass that message. And then you realize this message doesn't need to be passed just by you alone. You know, a plethora of a mix is important. Get other people to speak something. Then you realize you need to groom other people. Majority of my shows have a lot of new artists coming through. You need to mentor, groom other new artists who have something, who have a hand. You need to hold their hands and who look like they have the content, the God content and the quality that is needed there. Yeah.
When you talk about the programs that you have on TV,
Right.
are they musical programs?
They are musical program. One is called Gospel 10. We do a countdown of the 10 top songs that week. But we also do so many others. We still play maybe like a song from before that has maintained, and we are trying to show people it has maintained that way because it's good quality and it's the word of God that is being sung. And you also do some fresh artists for people to feel like, and then fresh jams, and then the countdown is based by guys. The other show is also a gospel show. It's called Fine Gospel. We spelled it F-Y-N. But fine is that is refined by the fire of the Holy Spirit. Then you give people that plethora mix.
Ile kipindi ingine ya kahawa ulipeleka wapi?
Inarudi. Lazima irudi. Ilifika mahali, then I wanted to rephase it. I want to remodel it, to change it a little bit and to give it a different flavor altogether. But it remains coffee. It was coffee with Mbuvi. Now it comes back as coffee with Dr. Mbuvi.
Talk about the doctor.
Yes. Hey. Doctor is honorary. I come here quite often by the Milele Hotel, and because there's an organization called Every Home for Christ. Now it's called Every Home, that has its board meetings oftenly, and the times when we have meetings, we come here. So we do a lot of training of pastors in different regions of the country, especially mashinani, so that maybe wale wako Nairobi wako na access to a lot of training and knowledge and everything. Wale wako so we are like trainers of pastors. So having done that, they recognize those efforts. Naka honorary kakakam. Doctor movie, Doctor of Love, yes.
And don't you find it hard for people now to define between the honorary doctor na mtu ana expect hapo ukuje useme my brethren in this regard?
I don't, because the jargon, if you need to use it, it's there. But majority of the shows I go to are music shows. You don't need to use that literally jargon that is complicated. And life, basically, simplicity is divine. That's what they say. And even Jesus made the message of the cross simple. Can you imagine? We are doctors. We are doctors because of the knowledge that we disperse, isn't it? Jesus created that knowledge. He didn't come with that jargon. He came with a very simple message. So the more learned you become, the simpler you need to make the message anyway. The more you realize. In fact, do you know the more learned you become, the more narrower you become. You become detailed in a smaller field. It should not make you proud. It should actually make you humble. Because it tells you, yani aka kadogo hivi ndio niko na doctorate yako. That means the rest of the world, there's a whole lot more of other things that I actually don't know. It should humble somebody. Yeah.
When you talk about that, turudi kwa muziki yako,
right.
There's a way you do your music, you know. Kuna kauchika yani ama. Yes. There's a way you do your music, and it's what actually gives you a lot of following when it comes to your music.
Thank you.
And there is that aspect of message.
Yes.
Na pia kuna hiyo other aspect.
Yes.
Of art.
Yes.
Inside your music.
Yes.
You know, what is your thinking, especially when you are coming up with a song? Because all your songs, they seem to follow a certain pattern.
The thing is, you don't even need to overthink it. You just need to be you. God created you in such a unique way, such that the message of the cross, you pass it as you. You get? So he created me with a nature that is very, very bubbly, you know, voluptuous, very noisy and everything. So when he created me and fun-loving and exciting, like I like the lighter side of life. You get? So God created me that way, such that I can receive this message and pass it in that format. There are people who would find that too much of a joke and they wouldn't want to listen to me. That's why God created people like Marion Shako, Eunice Njeri, for that kind of... Get the message of God, let it dwell. The next moment you speak, you will speak the same message, but in the movie way that God created you to be. So it's really about the music getting personified into the character that you are. Yes.
I think we'll be taking a listening to one of the music as well. Right. But before that, let's talk about, you came up with this new song, Tulisikiza Ukilia Moko.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a Kamba song. But again, ukakaa chini, ukarethink, and then decided to do an amapiano of it. What, yani nini ilikusukuma consider Ukilia Moko na si Kawaya?
That's a very good question. And at times that's why people are told, ask broadly, ask people's opinions and hear what they have to do. So I like talking to the new school artists, the guys who came even after me. People like Timeless Noel. I called Timeless Noel and I told him, hey, guess what? I want to do a remix of Kwata Kawaya. And I'll try and do it amapiano. But when I talked to my producer at first, he told me, hey, Kwata Kawaya, amapiano is too fast for Kwata Kawaya is too fast for amapiano. So when I talked to Timeless Joy, he said, why don't you do Okilia Moko? Because number one, it doesn't even have a video. And it's Indiana, because Kwaito, Okilia Moko is in Kwaito style, South African style, and amapiano is Indiana sana. So why don't you do it amapiano? I was like, that's a good idea. So I went to the studio, amapiano. So it's good to ask. It's good to, don't ever feel like you're a know-it-all. Kina Timeless Noel found me singing and he was just dancing. Now he sings. At times he might have a better idea than I have. So ask. Let the music carry along as many ideas as you can get. Yeah.
I think we'll be listening to Tusikize Ukilia Moko amapiano. Cheze hiyo kitu bwana.
If you're not ashamed to praise, come on praise him and let me see you do it like this. If you're not ashamed to praise, come on praise him and let me see you do it like this. Makes you wanna go, makes you wanna go, makes you wanna go, go on, makes you wanna go on.
It says lift the Lord, lift your hands up. Praise the Lord. Neema inatosha. This is the first song I ever wrote, and immediately we released it. I did a group called Shama. Immediately we released it in the year 2000, by the way, the original. It went straight up to #1. It was the biggest song that year. Maybe the song which would have rivaled it is a song by Makoma.
I was actually even telling Leo, good to mention that.
Yes.
A movie, tulikuwa tunamsikia 2000 tukua wadogo kidogo. Leo jamaa kwa anapiga miaka ngapi? How many years bana?
Music 23 years.
23 years.
Yeah, because this song is the first one. It was 23 years ago. So it's 23 years.
23 years.
It's easy to count. So every time we turn to 2024, 24 years. 2030, 30 years. 2050, 50 years.
23 years man.
Neema.
Hey.
They look like zinaendanga hivi. If you're enjoying what you do, they don't look like many years. And every time I release a song, I feel like this is my first time. The excitement is still there. Why? Because I'm rooted on the vine, the true vine that is Christ. It gives you life every day, renews you every day. So every time you do something, it's a passion, it's a joy, because you want people to know Christ in another new way that you've discovered him.
And funny enough is, you sing also in Kamba.
Yes.
And the same songs in Kamba, listened by almost everyone.
It has nothing to do with any skill that I have. Neema. Mungu aliamua. What you do is, when you give whatever you have to God, he takes it, he breaks it, and he gives it, and it goes round, and you even have remainder. That's the thing with God. Trust him with the little. The little that he put in your heart is not as little as you think. Give it to him and he'll surprise you. He will place you in places you did not anticipate he could. Because how do you explain, this was my first song ever written, ever recorded. I never recorded really. Na tumetoa, and it's #1 in the country. I didn't study music. I'm not a musical philosopher. I'm not. How do you can't explain that. It's just God. Yeah.
And now you decided now you redo it.
Yes.
In the modern way.
Yes, because I felt every time I perform this song, majority of the times it's the first song I start with in any show, even up to the before this one came out, even up to the recent gigs, and the song catches, it opens the ground vizuri, it shikas. It's a very good opener for my performances. So like this song is still relevant now. How about if I give it the beat of now? Don't change the content. Where we go wrong in as far as ministry is concerned, when we want to funkify the ministry, we change the content. Don't change the content. Change the container. What carries the content is, imagine, hata nikupatia bottle in a fancy aje, you want water as water. If I change it into any other fluid, ikwe uji, you wanted water. Don't change the content. The container you can. The container, you have that freedom. God has given you that. The style, be it a piano, be it kwaito, be whatever, that you can. But the message of God that he gave you, don't change it. It works.
And talking about don't change the content, you've remained consistent, the same path of content. Kitu unaimba, kitu ulimba 2000 is still the same thing you're singing 23 years
later.
But if you look at what has been happening, unaona kijana anaingia mziki, bwana sifiwe kidogo.
Yeah. I think it's about being grounded, because it's God who keeps you grounded. I ascribe to a scripture that is a very common scripture actually. Psalms 1:1-3. And it says, blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly. Your walk is very important. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. On it does he meditate day and night. And the scripture still tells you in verse 3, you shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. It does not wither, and it bears its fruit in its season. So that tree is actually you in that story. So you're planted by the vine, the true vine. Then Christ is passing through you. The older you go, even the Bible says, as your years, so shall your strength be. So you're not supposed to go up. You know the way ile map tuko nacholewa unaendanga hivi, there's a high point, then you start teremka. Kwa God ni hivi. Because daily he's giving you fresh. Daily he's growing you. Daily he's renewing you. Daily he's strengthening you. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk. So God essence is the secret. That's it. Put God essence, you'll find.
And in the when you talk about pia God kama essence yako, there are songs that were also released, and some of them for people that listen to them and unasikia hiyo ngoma iko na uzito fulani ndani. Especially you talked about Mbakie.
Yes. Mbakie just means God. It's more or less. I've picked a little bit of the element of the story of Abraham, that God, and I think now it's being described in the New Testament. He was looking forward. He dwelt in tents, but he was looking forward to a building whose author is God, and it won't wither. So Mbakie means build for me a house. Make for me, and that's why I say make for me a big house, a beautiful house that's not built by hands. A house that is, built upon a solid rock. So that even whatever wind, whatever water, and that could be what I'm looking for in heaven, my life currently, and even in my ministry, that could be a house, and God feel it, make it firm and stable. So it's all about God. If you intertwine everything with God, if He's the foundation, if everything that we see or hear, the foundation block is God, and it has all been here. When we talk about the years of Adam until now, and it's still standing and it's firm, then how much more when God, and na hapa wanadamu pia wameongeza tumikono twao na shetani amejaribu kuharibu. How about ile kwa founded na God permanently? It cannot shake, it cannot wither, it cannot fail.
Mbakie, sio kama director, do we have Mbakie? Ananiambia atatafute hiyo ngoma tu.
Ana director kwa hapa anangangana, how do you spell Mbakie? MB akifika MB anaandika MBU. Oh, no ni movie. Now Mbakie MBA.
Ako hapo anangangana niko
ataipata.
Anyway, movie.
Yes.
As we move forward, apart from your amapiano pia, are we going to see more of such projects ama?
Yes.
Like pia sahi tuseme mambo pia ina evolve, tunaongelea mambo ya generation Z.
Yes.
And pia vitu zinabadilika.
Yes.
Did you expect more from amapiano ama? What is the plan?
Now, the thing is, I have a myriad of songs. It's not even about what am I going to record, although I feel like going to record. I have, I think 2 or 3 other amapianos I've recorded. I have a lot of worship songs that I've recorded. So I'm waiting down God to tell me which one do I release next. Because I feel like releasing quite a number of amapianos. But at the same time, I feel there are songs that are ready I want to release. I normally have videos ready that are just waiting, and the times unasikia nikagona nakwambia usitoe hiyo kwanza, toa hii nyingine, toa nyingine. And right now I was coming in and I was listening to a song by Kirk that is very old song. It's about lifting the Lord, it's lifting hands up, like you're saying I sing the same, but this time in Swahili. And the hip hop, I wanted to do it in a hip hop, and our hip hop is not HIP HOP, it's HIP HOPE, hip hop. So so I feel like you're talking about Gen Z. We need to reach to them a little bit more. And I'm liking the way I'm seeing many people going to schools, reaching up and trying to lift them up. I feel like I need to do more for those guys. So I don't know where I'll go. The Bible says in John 3:8, the wind blows where it wills. So is a man led of the Spirit of God. The thing is, prepare yourself. Akikwambia enda hivi uko tayari. Enda hivi uko tayari. So I have all that myriad of songs. Yeah.
So we expect more songs coming from you.
More.
And
a lot.
Nilikuwa nikuulize, how do you write your songs?
Hiyo swali inaulizanga watu, leo nimepatikana na unauliza.
Unakaa tu mahali unashtukizia.
An idea comes and I'm listening to a song, probably. An idea can come when a pastor preaches something very significant, and an idea comes. And I am sorry, many pastors, if you see me holding my phone in the service, I'm trying to record that idea that has come inspired by what you said. At times some songs when I'm in the shower, sana when I'm in the shower. I didn't understand why when I'm in the shower. And I asked a certain prophetess actually, akaniambia, no, it feels like, you know, like the way rain falls down. It's like the way dew falls, like the way manna falls, is the same way the music would come. There's an element of that. So I said, oh, okay, cool, that's cool. Happens. Sometimes you wake up with a chorus and a tune. Yeah. Sometimes a scripture inspires you to write it.
And then scenarios, you've gone to studio, ukajaribu kuimba ikakataa.
It happens. It happens. The voice could be tired. It has overworked, or kuna kitu tu inakwama tu hapa inaweza ringa. But now with time and experience, nowadays we are able to play around. Hii note ikikataa kwenda hivi, with experience you're able to twist it this and it still sounds really nice. Because I could be trying to sing something like Lord, I believe in you, and that time voice is tired. I can't say believe, so I can go Lord, I believe in you. So with time and experience, you've learned how to still get a good result. Hata sauti kiringia wapi? Because now what will you tell people when you have a show? It is here, they paid and they are ready to hear you. You must learn how to play around with your voice and still deliver.
There's nothing wrong, like people have paid to come and listen to you.
Unless the voice is totally, that one wataelewa, totally gone. But even if you have a small element, you can only sing on one key. Where's each other? Because my voice, I have a big range. And maybe people are coming to expect that big range. At times, even if you can't go high, if you hit a minor or another, a seventh, it will still sound sweet and guys will be like, wow. Kumbe they don't know. Haiko yote, umenyonga kakitu, but inatoka bado poa because God inspires you. Just like a pathway when you're going somewhere. Unaweza enda na SGR ukienda coast, unaweza enda na ndege. Ndege is faster. SGR might be slower, but it has his own amenities that will make the journey beautiful. So you maximize on what you have. Yeah.
Director, unasema umeona Mbake? Tusikize Mbake kidogo. Tusikize Mbake kidogo, turudi tuchape kwa twende. Piga hiyo Mbake.
Numbamba na kenene numbanzeo itakitwe na moko numbaleketwe iviane elomu netondo nenesene waku. Then simply goes like this: Mbake 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 numbaba Mbake. Then it goes Mbake Mbake simple.
So in simple translation, come to LA, that means
build for me a house, a big house that's not built by hands. A house built on a solid rock, or a solid foundation, because I know I am yours. That sounds weird until you know the scripture says, they that know the Lord shall be strong and do exploits. The Bible says his divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through a knowledge of him. So a lot of our growth and our strength in God is about our knowledge, knowing that word. That's why I said listen to the word a lot. Back here, build for me.
Build for me. I'm told we only have 2 minutes, so we're utilizing those 2 minutes to be the future project in the coming days. And also tell people how they can reach you out, how they can find you.
Yes.
And then tutakafunga.
Yes. There are whole amazing projects. There's a collabos that are coming, and I want to let the cat out of the bag. A lot of collabos, a lot of our pianos, a lot of our R&Bs that are gospel, a lot of hip hop. I'm experimenting, I'm touching everything as long as the message of God is going. But I want to tell young people, delight yourself in God and he will grant you all the desires of your heart. Those desires are given to you by God. But in his time, he makes everything beautiful. Make him the core. The Matthew 6:30, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all those things shall be added unto you, and they'll be placed in the right places. Yes, Dr. Mbuvi, every handle. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, yeah.
So astafute Mbuvi Kawaya.
Mbuvi Kawaya, atafute Dr. DR Mbuvi.
I love
yes.
Tumemaliza sasa.
Yes.
Kawaya.
Yes.
One word for Kawaya. It's one of your greatest songs.
Yes.
The impact of Kawaya
yes.
up until now.
Yes. Kwata Kawaya just means kwata guitar, cheza guitar. Sindio, it's based on Psalms 150 verse 6. It says, let everything that I breath praise the Lord. With some higher 10 strings instrument, I'll play my music. Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Yes, and there's another verse in Psalms 118 verse 24. This is the day that the Lord has made, we shall rejoice and be glad in it. That's Kwata Kawaya for you.
Kwata Kawaya. What can we do? We wind up this particular show up on Tunamalizia and we close up this chapter of Entertainment Friday, but not before we get to Kwata Kawaya. My name is Chris Sambo. See you next week on Friday, same time, same place. Let's do this. Kawaya.